what is your view of the nature of the international system? For example, someone like John Mearsheimer views it as anarchic. What is your conception?
Well, as you can probably guess, I don't love labels because I think that they oversimplify. So I like to describe things either in paragraphs or articles or books. But basically, I believe that peace and international cooperation are vital and achievable. And the difference between me and John Mearsheimer, who I admire enormously and like very much as an individual and like as a personal friend, is that he believes that in the anarchic relations of governments, tragedy is inevitable. His great text is called The Tragedy of Great Power Politics. And his view is that because there is so much insecurity in an anarchic world, great powers are bound not only to jostle with each other, but to struggle for dominance. And if two are struggling for dominance, one wins and one loses. The setup is a zero sum, or I would say a negative sum game. In fact, the title, Tragedy, suggests a negative sum game where the struggle goes on and in some sense a disaster ensues. So he believes that. I believe that cooperation is possible and vital. John gets a lot of credit, in my view, for accurate predictions. And I can mention several, but two that I would mention are his predictions that US foreign policy vis-a-vis Russia, and specifically in Ukraine, would lead us to confrontation. He gets a lot of credit for that because he was very clear on that point in 2014 and has been clear on that ever since. And he also made a prediction which is, in a way, even more powerful, that back in 2001, 2002, when his great book was published, he said the relations between the US and China are benign, but as China continues to grow, they will develop into hostility. And if you had asked me back then, 20 years ago, I would have said, come on, John, there's no reason for that hostility. And 20 years later, his prediction was accurate. So I give him a lot of predictive credit. But where we really differ is that I can't accept personally tragedy as being the state of affairs and the inevitable outcome. I think we can do better than that. And certainly there is a lot of cooperation in the world, in our own immediate lives, in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our states, in our nation. And I believe that that can apply globally as well. Another point, though, as an economist, where I take exception to this is on two essential points. One is that I believe that there are great gains from trade. So that's pretty deeply embedded in economic thinking. It goes back in its clearest initial statement to Adam Smith in 1776 in The Wealth of Nations, but it's proved in innumerable theories and empirical studies ever since. So I want the world to be interconnected because I think it is good. But a second point is I believe the world is inevitably interconnected on profoundly important challenges, such as the survival of our oceans, our biodiversity, our ecosystems, our physical environment, which is being deeply deranged by the scale of human activity, now over $100 trillion per year scale of activity. And we need to cooperate. We're not in a position to allow anarchy to prevail. There's one even more important point, and that is that ever since the dawn of the thermonuclear age, and one could argue ever since the dawn of the atomic age in 1945, but certainly since the dawn of thermonuclear weapons, we are trapped on the edge of self-destruction, literal annihilation of our species. I take that very seriously. So while we've had tragedies in the past, World War I, World War II, the 30 Years' War, innumerable tragedies that John Mearsheimer could explain very, very well, I believe we can't afford yet another tragedy of this kind, because in the thermonuclear age, everything is different.